Afternoon, members. We have already formed a quorum. It is also time to start the meeting. Now call to order the meeting of the Subcommittee on Import and Export General Amendment Regulation 2013. This is the third meeting. First of all, let's invite the team from the administration to join us.
Hello. In attendance today with the following public officers: Mrs. Marion Lai, the Permanent Secretary for Food and Health; Mr. Philip Chen, Deputy Secretary for Food and Health; Mr. Brian Low, Deputy Director of Trade and Industry; and Mr. Yu Kun Hing, Assistant Commissioner for Customs and Excise. From the Department of Justice, we have Mr. Llewellyn Mui, Senior Assistant Solicitor General; Ms. Leonora Yip, Senior Assistant Law Draftsman; and Mr. Peter C., Senior Government Counsel. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. At our previous meetings, a number of issues and questions have been raised. The administration has come back with a reply, and in fact, even issues raised yesterday were already responded to, and the administration has been quick, and we have already got it in writing, which is tabled. So, first of all, please take a look of CB bracket 2, 785/12-13 bracket 01. PS, who among your team will be giving a reply? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I would like to defer to Mr. Philip Chen, the Deputy Secretary, to give you a briefing. Mr. Chen, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a number of papers. First of all, there is a paper addressing the 10 questions asked by Mr. Vincent FANG. In that paper, we have given a very detailed reply. So I just wonder if members have got the chance to walk through the paper. If you have read the paper, I will welcome questions from you. Basically, Mr. FANG asked a number of questions. First of all, about the degree of shortage. I think yesterday we were able to exchange our views on that matter. In the paper, we have given some data. Say, for example, since the beginning of this year up to now, we've received certain information. We believe that it is an objective reality that we have a shortage of powdered formula. And then Mr. FANG would like to know whether there are overseas examples as to the restrictions concerning the export of products. We've also set out certain examples in the paper. As to question number 3, Mr. FANG asked about the birth figures. We are not able to give you the statistics on the demand of infant and young children for powdered formula number 1, 2, and 3, since we don't keep them. For paragraph 4, we are asked to talk about the monthly changes in relation to the supply of powdered formula over a number of months. We did ask the major suppliers for such information, but so far they have indicated that since this is business secret, and so they are not in a position to share the information with us. The following 2 questions are about the law enforcement. Between 1st of March and 12th of March, the court decided in 11 cases with fines ranging from $500 to $5,000. Yesterday, mention was made about reminding the suspects and
about the arrangements for bail money. We touch on that in the paper. If you've got further questions, the Customs and Excise will be more than happy to elaborate. And then another question was about the strategies deployed by the CND, like the manpower deployment as well as the provision of equipment. The C&E department has got sufficient resources to enforce the law in accordance with the proposals in this amendment regulation. Of course, it is risk-based, and we're going to enhance our intelligence collection and will closely liaise with our mainland counterpart. Question 8, and this about the reference to Dr. Koh's public statement that a review would only be carried out after we have fine-tuned the supply chain. In paragraph 8, we've given an account and stated in the past, we believe that the suppliers need to step up their efforts to improve the supply chain operation to ensure that we have an adequate, stable and timely supply of powdered formula for Hong Kong people. This will be the goal of our work in the near term, and we hope that the formula suppliers will do a proper job in this area. And then a question was about the number of calls made to the hotline as well as the number of purchase orders. We've given an account about the figures. Since the 1st of February up to the 10th of March, over 6,000 calls were received, among which 3,000 plus were about making purchase orders. The details are set out in the paper. And then the last one asked by Mr. Fang was the so-called Hong Kong Code of Marketing and Quality of Formula Milk and related products and food products for infants and young children. And then, of course, we've also set up a hotline, and Mr. Fang asked whether the two would contradict each other. We don't think so. All along, we have been promoting the merits of breastfeeding as the best solution. So when we drew up the Hong Kong Code of Marketing, we adopted the same position. We would like to support and promote the merits of breastfeeding. So we are going to regulate the approach adopted in publicizing formula milk. But of course, certain parents may not be able to feed the baby with breast milk, and so they have to resort to powdered formula. In this way, it means that it becomes the essential source of nutrition. When there is a shortage, then the administration agrees that we need to address the problem of shortage. And that's why we have set up the special hotline. This is because we believe that towards the end of January, it was a fact that in the supply chain, in relation to the placing of orders via the hotline, it was not a satisfactory arrangement because the response was slow or the calls were not answered. So the government provides the hotline as a safety net, and we believe that it has been effective. We've already said that this is going to be of a short-term nature, and then we will try to see when the service can be scrapped. Thank you. Before members ask follow-up questions, I would like to remind colleagues that the administration has tabled a paper, and that's in relation to the points raised at yesterday's public hearing. The administration has already come back with certain replies. Say, for example, the meetings with the suppliers earlier on, we asked for some basic information about that liaison. And the administration has been very quick, and we asked for it yesterday, and today we have tabled the information. 4 members would like to ask questions, so could I suggest 5 minutes each? Vincent FANG, Sin Chung Kai, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok, and Mr. James Toh, in that order, as well as Mr. Shek Lai Him. So 5 minutes each. Mr. Vincent FANG. Mr. Chairman, could I confirm with you as to whether we will focus on the administration's reply to my questions, or can we talk about other things as well? Just the questions, yes. Just the replies to my 10 questions, yes. Focus on the reply. All right, Mr. Chairman, I have a number of questions. And then a word about law enforcement. I see that between the 1st of March and the 6th of March 2013, 137 offenders were remanded. They were arrested. Among them, 7 were refused bail due to their likelihood to abscond, or due to their failure to provide a reasonable amount of bail money. So I want to know whether more of them were found to have a greater likelihood to abscond or failure to provide reasonable amount of bail money. And please tell me what is the reasonable amount of bail money expected. And then in the answer to my first question, between 2006 and 2008, the level of import of products concerned was steady at 15 million kg per annum, so 16 million tins. In other words, 1.38 million tins per year. And then in 2012, from 2006 to since 2012, it reached over 44 million kg. And assuming that it's 0.9 kg per tin, then on average it means 48 million tins. In other words, 4 million tins per month. And then 2 million kg has been re-exported. In other words, we have to take that out. Roughly speaking, it means that starting from 2006 to 2008, at that time, it was 1.4 million tins. Today, we're talking about 4 million tins. So the increase is substantial. That's the monthly average. And then I asked a question about the birth rate. So we are talking about roughly 100,000 live births. Now, babies have to consume on average 5 tins of powdered formula. So 100,000 babies, in other words, 500,000 tins. So between 06 and 08, almost 1 billion tins have been taken out of Hong Kong. Now 4 million tins. Now when we talk about infants, we have got 100,000 babies, 500,000 tins, and yet we have got 4 million tins being demanded. In other words, 3.5 billion tins have gone somewhere else. And in fact, it includes babies born locally as well as babies born to non-local parents. Among them, almost 40% of them reside on the mainland. So if we can make sure that we have got a steady supply of 500,000 tins of powdered formula in Hong Kong, and then 3.3 million tins would be for other clients. Now the administration's policy seems to suggest that we shouldn't have that much business. We should lower the volume of trading, and then local babies can have the needs satisfied. Does it mean that we have to forego the business of selling 3.5 million tins so as to safeguard the supply of powdered formula to local babies? But I don't think this is going to steady the supply. We only need 500,000 tins a month, and then we can feed the babies born in Hong Kong, including the mainland babies born to non-local parents. So I want to ask the administration to come up with a reply.
P.S. Thank you. Basically, through this regulatory measure, we'd like to ensure that Hong Kong babies can have supply of powdered formula. We are not trying to stop any kind of retail business. We have explained many times that there are objective facts telling us that the shortage of powdered formula, especially before the Lunar New Year, actually existed. This measure will ensure that local babies will be supplied with powdered formula. And during this time, we have been discussing with suppliers, urging them to perfect their supply chain. When this can be done, we can actually review again the situation to see whether we still need this regulation. Thank you. Sorry, your time is up. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Chairman, I also like to ask about import figures. You said this was not divulged to you because it is commercially sensitive information, but the T&I department should have had trade declarations given to them, and you can dig up those figures from the T&I department. Is that right? PS or the Customs and Excise? Can I ask the T&I department or the Customs to add to what I'm going to say? Actually, in Mr. Fang's questions and also from the figures we quoted in the paper, those are from the Census and Statistics Department. The basis of those figures is from the Customs and Excise Department and actually from the trade declaration forms they have received upon import. Those are all collective figures, meaning that with regard to this series of goods, meaning powdered formula, there is a code, and we would collect the figures according or using this code. I'd like to see whether the T&ID would like to add. Thank you. I think the PS has explained clearly. The figures of import of powdered formula for infant and young children, as Mr. Sin was saying, could be gleaned from trade declarations. Well, actually, that is really the source of these figures. And these figures have been gathered by the C&S department. In fact, we have got the figures from the C&S department also. Well, that I know. You have the raw data. Since you have these figures, Dr. Fang was asking about figures relating to each brand, and therefore you can give him the breakdown. You should not just give him the aggregate figure. Since you have the figures, maybe you need to work harder to look at the actual invoices. And in fact, you can just dig up your computer records because you should know how many cans of what brand have been imported. Now, I don't know. If I ask this question, maybe your clerical staff may have to work long hours for 2 nights in order to gather the figures. I'm sorry about that, but we want those figures. Why don't you give them to us? Or is it impossible? If it is impossible, just tell me. But if you have got the statistics, you can look at each declaration form and let us have the breakdown for each brand vis-a-vis import numbers. Chairman, maybe I can ask the Customs and Excise Department to answer. Well, as the PS and the T&ID explained, when importers receive goods, they have to make a declaration. The CNSD will gather the figures on behalf of the CNED, and those figures are for the purpose of statistics. From what I know, they would declare the type of goods and also the code of that type of goods. As to the brands, they may not be available from the declaration forms. That's the fact. Mr. Sin, I don't know whether you have done trade declarations. When my company does trade declarations, we do not have to also provide the brand names. We just use a code. I think it is an international code. We do not have the brand names on the forms. Chairman, now I don't know whether my request is asking too much. But if it is a question asked, can we not ask the Customs and Excise to also ask companies to declare the brand names? Am I asking too much? Even if it is not done now, can we ask that be done? Well, it has never been done. I know. But now you are making a regulation. Mr. Sin, I think what you are saying has nothing to do with this regulation. I don't want you to waste time. I still have 50 seconds. We are concerned about the supply and export of powdered formula. When you conduct your review, I am sure you have to revisit this point because you have not been able to gather figures about the import of each brand of powdered formula. So I'm saying you should start asking them to do now so that you can gather the relevant figures. I'd just like to mention that, and this is for you to consider. I think this has nothing to do with the regulation under discussion. Because frankly speaking, I am in business. You can ask the businessmen whether they are willing to do it. Chairman, this is only your understanding. We are totally willing to do it, said Mr. Fang. We are very willing to do it, Chairman. Well, the brand name can be cooked up. No, you cannot invent a brand name. You can be imprisoned if you invent any brand name. People would only like the brand name to be known. If you invent brand names when you import certain goods, you are breaking the law, Chairman. Well, okay, that's for you to consider. Next one, Mr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Whether it be from the replies of the FNHB or from the information given, I think there is an important concept that the administration should make clearer. We have seen such wording, and that we are prohibiting the export of powdered formula by anybody to any place in Hong Kong, and also if there is or except by people who have an export license. Now, I think we have to clarify this concept because some members of the public and the media are saying that we are limiting or regulating export, and they call this regulation an order to limit export, meaning that there is a limit for tourists visiting Hong Kong for taking powdered formula away from Hong Kong. But this is not a limit on export. I think those are two different matters. I'd like you to clarify with regard to the normal export channels which require an exemption or in export license. I understand if it is transshipment, you will waive the requirement for an export license. So I'd like to ask you, how does the system of export license operate? Are you doing anything also to change that system? I think you should clarify the objective of this regulation. This is important. Secondly, at the public hearing, we have heard from the industry and also different stakeholders within the supply chain and also from women's groups that they understand we need to have this restriction because I myself have been to the Shui station and other stations. I can see a lot of chaos there, and I do understand why this is done. Yes, people may have different views, but we understand why you are doing it. But then there are also many people who are saying that this regulation should only be temporary. I know that you will look at the market situation, the supply situation, and then adjust the regulation. But can you make it even clearer that this regulation would only be temporary, and also state in what circumstance you would remove or reduce the limitation so that you can respond to the stakeholders in the industry or members of the public or district organizations who have forwarded the same view? I'd like to have rather clear answers, please. P.S. Thank you. Whether you call this an order to limit export or limit the carrying of goods away from Hong Kong. Well, this is just a way of expressing the concept. In fact, this is a regulation to regulate export. Before we had this regulation, there was nothing to regulate the export of powdered formula. People could do anything they wanted. You did not have to apply to anybody for permission. But this regulation came into force on the 1st of March. If anyone would like to export powdered formula from Hong Kong, they would have to apply to the TNID. With approval given, there would be an export license issued. Then people can export powdered formula. The export would include the export of powdered formula by land, by sea, or by air. Just now, we talked about an order to limit the carrying of powdered formula away from Hong Kong. Actually, we are trying to combat parallel trading, and this would involve people taking goods away from Hong Kong. That is why people call this a regulation to limit the moving of goods out of Hong Kong. And as we were trying to say, all laws have to be fair and legitimate. And we have to also take care of the needs of certain tourists who may have babies traveling with them. Therefore, we are providing an exemption by way of 1.8 kilogram of net weight. Since they usually carry it on their person, so people say this is a limit on the carrying of goods. But actually, this is a kind of regulation of export. This is what it is. Secondly, Mr. Low asked whether we can clarify that this is only temporary. In other words, if we are going to have a review, what kind of objective criteria we will go by. I think we have explained in previous meetings that we must talk to stakeholders, especially the suppliers or distributors. We have to understand the way the goods are transported, the goods are replenished, and also the accuracy of import of such goods into Hong Kong, so that we will not have a recurrence of the shortage we experienced before Lunar New Year. And also their hotline services, they have to be enhanced, so that no mother, no parent should be prevented from getting the supply through the hotline. And also, before the Lunar New Year, there was also shortage at the retail level. And the shortage might be because the goods were not sold to local customers, but from different channels, they went into the hands of parallel traders. And that is why the suppliers had also taken action with regard to retailers who were involved in suspicious practices. There were measures taken. In fact, supply was suspended or reduced for such retailers. All these measures have to be enhanced. At the last meeting, we promised that we would review the situation. We would have meetings with the suppliers, telling them that they should upgrade their entire system. And also, we should make further observations, and that is at peak periods. If you look at the parallel trading situation, they would be around, the peak periods would be around the Golden Week and also the Lunar New Year. So we have to observe such periods in the future to see whether market supply would be kept stable and sufficient. And then we would have the confidence to remove or revoke this regulation. I would remind members to be precise in their questions, and also the administration should also give precise and concise answers. Next one, James Toh. Chairman, I'd like to ask about the application for the export license. Supposing a person would like to export 10 cans and he applies, does he have to give a reason? If it is for consumption by his family members, does this person have to be a trader first? How much does it cost and how long does it take? If he needs to export 10 cans, is it that you will not give the permission for him to do so? Can I go to the DD of the TNID? Thank you, Chairman. The export license system doesn't mean that anyone can come to the TNID to apply for an export license for taking powdered formula out of Hong Kong. This is pegged to the import registration system. In other words, the export license would only be issued to registered importers under Cap 612, the Food Safety Ordinance. If they come forward to apply, they would have to provide the relevant import documentation to prove that indeed the goods have been imported from outside Hong Kong instead of from being gathered from Hong Kong retailers.
And it is only when this condition is met shall we issue an export license to the applicant. I want to know if you have confirmed the legality with your legal advisor, and I hope our own LA would also do some research. Now, I think your concept runs like this. Now, A has imported 10,000 tins, and he has to do this before he can re-export it. Say, for example, somebody has collected 10 tins in Hong Kong and he would like to export them. And say, for example, he's a trader. So I want to confirm with you, in which provision can you exercise your power to prevent the license from being issued? So I want to know whether you are going to adopt certain administrative measures, or does it have a statutory backup? LA? I think I have to look up the relevant provisions. I can only give a reply afterwards. Please analyze the legal position for us. Thank you, Mr. To. For the drafting of the regulation, of course, we have consulted legal opinion in advance. The Director General of TNI is the authority to vet the application for an export license. He's the authority, and he may impose conditions. Can you not provide us with the operative wording? I want to know whether the power is as follows. That is, the Director General has the power to approve it or not. And then administratively, you would say that only those that have been imported in the first place can be exported again. Or do you have further details? So that for this milk ban, you have further details concerning the operation. I try to understand James To's request. That is, I think he would like to know whether it is administrative or legal in nature. If it is legal in nature, please cite the chapter and verse. And I want to know about the details. Yes, he would like to know the basis of your operation. If you can give an answer, please do, or else after the meeting or next time. Well, under the relevant law, the Director General of TNI will be empowered to issue an export license upon application. The law also allows the DG to impose certain conditions at the time of issuance. Yes, I do understand, and I'm sure you have been working on it for a long time, and I have been a legislator for a long time, so I'm interested in the operative clause. Now, the DG will approve. Can he simply say, I approve? Or are there further statutory wordings so that the DG, in granting the application or not, may refer to a set of criteria or certain prerequisites? So I want to know whether such can be found in some general words or some specific wording. I just wonder if your colleagues behind you can provide an answer. Yes. If I may talk about the legal basis is in Section 3 of Cap 60. I understand Mr. To's question, but I stand to be corrected. I don't think it is specifically spelled out in the law to say that the applicant must be an exporter. It will be dealt with administratively at the time of license issuance. Abraham Sheikh. Mr. Chairman, a number of papers have been tabled, and then I think in that paper the administration told us why the administration would not support a sunset clause, and you can find in the annex to the paper a certain paragraph number 2. It is said that it may give people a misunderstanding that and it will also mean that the current operation will not succeed. And please elaborate on this point. And then another point is about Article 115 of the Basic Law. It is said that BL 115 is a policy, and it does not confer any right on any person. But then for BL 115, I think it talks about free trade. But then free trade and free port would not just be for companies, it's for individuals as well. In the past, individuals have been able to bring the goods out freely. So it's not a matter of parallel trading. Now, all out of a sudden, you impose a 2-can limit. So I want to know whether you're violating the rights of an individual. So please elaborate on this point. And then paragraphs 8, 9, 10, or rather in paragraph 4, Chong Feng Yun's case was referred to, but then in that case it was merely said that when it came to the interpretation of the basic law provisions, you had to look at the context and the purpose. Now, the Hong Kong government is not in agreement with this approach, and interpretation of the basic law is being sought. So is it a good idea for you to cite the Chong Feng Yun case to back you up? And then paragraphs 8 to 10. Now, with the amendment to the regulation, you are empowering the government to impose this restriction. It is said that 115, BL 115 is not engaged. Now, in paragraph 9, it is said that we would like to protect the interests of the local babies. We hope that the local parents can get sufficient powdered formula for their babies. When we take your information as a whole, sorry, Mr. Sheikh, I have to interrupt you. In fact, we are not asking the administration to comment on this paper. Well, I want to take this opportunity, but we are focusing on the 10 questions asked by Vincent FANG. Yes, I know, Mr. Chairman. Allow me to ask my question because I have to go to another meeting. They can choose not to answer, but I need to raise this point. Well, Mr. Chairman, the admin can choose not to answer on the spot, but I am using my own time. I'm going to ask it anyway, so let me ask my question now. So my question is it true that the shortage is so severe that the Hong Kong children cannot buy properties? Hong Kong children cannot buy powdered formula? No. Is it just for a short period of time, a few days in February and in Shangshui only, or is it very extensive? Is it still true today, so that you're led to take this action? BL 115 has been referred to, but I don't think the administration's explanation is clear enough. The administration has less than a minute's time. I don't think the DOJ's explanation is correct. Permanent Secretary, Mr. Chairman, shortage. The shortage was not confined to the North District. It occurred in the North District and then it spread to the urban area. Even members said that it was found in the older areas like Kwai Ching. Since we've launched the new measures, including the move launched on the 1st of March, I think things have already stabilized. It is exactly because of our administrative measures. In the absence of such administrative measures, I think it will be unimaginable. Mr. Chairman, we have to rely on the facts and the data. I think I can no longer trust this administration. Next, Ms. Regina Yip. Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up on a point made by a member, saying that the basic law says that Hong Kong is a free port. My understanding is that for a free port, it means that there isn't any import duty. It doesn't mean that you cannot have restrictions and ask for licenses, etc., for import and export. Mr. Low. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In Hong Kong, we've always been saying that we practice free trade and that Hong Kong is a free port. As to what the spirit is about, I think we need to understand that a free port doesn't mean that it is totally lack of import and export controls. In the past and currently, Hong Kong does impose certain controls on the import and export of certain goods. The crux of the matter is that when we do exercise control over the import and export of certain goods, we have to understand the motive or the purpose. If it is for the purpose of protecting our own products, then it is protectionism, and it goes against the spirit of free trade. But then when we want to control the import and export of certain goods for a good policy reason, say security, environmental protection, or meeting our obligation under the international treaty, then in fact other places have also introduced similar controls for similar purposes. Mrs. Yip. So the spirit of free trade, the spirit of free port means that we don't practice protectionism. If, say, we have a shortage of certain kind of foodstuff, we don't allow it to be exported. This is in line with the spirit, is it right? I don't know whether I can answer this question. But then the spirit of free trade is that if we want to impose a control on import or export, then there must be a good policy justification. It cannot be based on the desire to protect one's own commercial interests. And I believe that in the case of Hong Kong, for us to impose any import or export control, we must have a good justification, like to meet environmental protection rules. Say, for example, if we don't want to have the ozone depleting substances, and then for security reasons, like the import or export of explosives, they have to be under control, and then sometimes we have to meet our international obligations, and we may impose control on the import and export of certain goods. Not long ago, the PS also explained why we had to introduce this export control or export restriction concerning powdered formula. We have found a shortage of local supply. Mr. Low, please leave me time to ask questions. You are already repeating yourself as to other questions. Now, we are re-exporting 2 million kg of powdered formula. Is re-export, not transshipment. Import and then re-export, not transshipment. Has it been re-exported to mainland China? Information we have shows that China is one of the markets. I think another main destination is Macau. Just now, Mr. Vincent FANG said that as long as we can secure the supply of a few million tins, then that would be adequate. Now, for us to apply for an export license, if it is for legitimate export, normal export, it will be permitted. Is it right? We have been told by mainland friends that, in fact, the demand is currently being confined to Guangdong, had other markets in China be interested in our powdered formula as well, it would be a different picture. So parallel trading is to serve the Guangdong province only, is that right? Now, for the figures, before the introduction of the export control, I don't have the information about the destinations, but I can say that since 1st of March, when we introduced the need for an export license, the main destinations for the export licenses have been mainland China, but we are not sure about the specific provinces involved. So mainly speaking, the powdered formula have been exported to mainland China and Macau. Now, if we talk about normal trading, if an ordinary trader is to apply for an export license, will he encounter any problems?
I think what the regulation seeks to combat is the moving of small quantities of goods away from Hong Kong, and there will be no problem with normal trading. Mr. Dennis Kwok, from the paper given to us by the DOJ with regard to BL 115, that is a 3-page document. There is one important point. These are in paras 8 to 10 of the paper. The DOJ has said that if indeed this regulation engages BL 115 and whether it meets the proportionality test, I believe DOJ colleagues would know that in many common law jurisdictions, if you need to make emergency legislation, very often they will consider including a sunset clause, because with emergency legislation, it means there might be the engaging of certain constitutional provisions. So the authorities may consider including a sunset clause. Why? Because when a court reviews if a law is constitutional, one of the important factors for consideration is whether the law itself has got a sunset clause. If it has, whether it can meet the proportionality test. That will be a very important consideration for the court. However, in this paper, especially in paras 8 to 10, you have not clearly stated why this time around the administration has decided not to include a sunset clause, and how this relates to the proportionality test. That is, if the BL 115 is engaged, whether this will still be constitutional. I believe the DOJ paper has not addressed this point. Whether it be for this particular piece of emergency legislation and also future such laws, we need to know whether they are constitutional. We need to know whether they need a sunset clause to be included. This is a very important factor. I hope the DOJ can address that point again in written form. That is the constitutional side of matters. Who can take the question? PS or who else? Let me start with the policy and then I will defer to the DOJ colleagues. Basically, the drafting process of the entire regulation is based on public interest. We do not include a sunset clause also because of public interest. As I was explaining, if we do not know the time frame, if we do not know when the supply chain can be enhanced, and yet if we include a sunset clause but we do not know whether we can actually achieve it, then, sorry Chairman, I'm not asking for the rationale for including the sunset clause. I am looking at the engaging of the BL 115 and also the proportionality test, and how that relates to the sunset clause. As I was saying, when the court needs to review whether a law is constitutional, it will consider a basket of factors, and one of them is the important one, whether there is a sunset clause. If the paper does not address this point, I think this paper is missing in that respect. Can I defer to the DOJ, please? Mr. Mui? Thank you, Chairman. On Mr. Kwok's point, I need to explain that paras 8 to 10 of the paper discuss the proportionality test. I believe if people read the entire paper in its context, you will understand that Para 8 sets a very important premise, and that is assuming that BL 115 is engaged and that the proportionality test is applicable to BL 115. That is vis-a-vis the regulation and whether the regulation is in line with BL 115. Now there is an assumption here. As at present, there has never been one case at a Hong Kong court that has touched upon BL 115 and what kind of a provision it is, meaning that whether it is a general policy regulation so that we do not have to apply the proportionality test to it. This is one possibility. This paper also discusses proportionality test because we assume that in future when the court gives consideration to this issue and if it agrees to making use of such a principle, we are of the view that even if we apply the proportionality test, the regulation would still be able to pass the test. In paras 9 and 10, we have explained the reasons for our consideration. Mr. Kwok mentions the sunset clause issue. Now, I understand him to be saying that in many common law jurisdictions, indeed, there is this being done, but it doesn't mean that whenever there are cases which are reviewed by the court and whether the court would consider whether that law is in line with the human rights provisions in that place, when the proportionality test is applied, even so, the court may not ask for the sunset clause, and very often, if the court is of the view that there should be a sunset clause, very often the cases would have to do with limitation on human rights or basic human rights. Exactly, the last part. I like a paper on that. That is what is missing in this paper. Chairman, please let me just supplement a little bit on our consideration. With regard to the engaging of BL 115, as we said at the beginning of the paper, we are not of the view that BL 115 is an enabling provision. It sets a policy for the SAR that we should pursue free trade. Chapter 3 of the Basic Law is on the protection of human rights, but this is not in Chapter 3. It is not in Chapter 3, and I believe members can easily understand this. And Article 115 is saying that the Hong Kong SAR shall pursue the policy of free trade and safeguard the free movement of goods, etc. It doesn't target the individual or companies, and it doesn't enable the individuals or companies in any way. This is also in response to Mr. Abraham Shek's point. Now, why do we want to quote the Zhang Fengyun case in the paper? Not because we think that the judgment by CFA in that case applies totally to the present situation. Rather, the CFA has stated in that case that when interpreting the clauses and articles of the Basic Law, we have to consider the background and nature and objectives of those articles. And the background to Article 115 is such that we have the Import and Export Ordinance, which has existed before and after the handover. Just like in yesterday's meeting, we explained that before the handover, according to the IEO, we had already imposed restrictions on import and export, and that is in the schedule to the subsidiary legislation, to IEO. Knowing that background, we are of the view that the present regulation would mean that we are already empowered to impose restrictions on import and export. But of course, we agree that there is a requirement in this regulation. Sorry, Mr. Mui, you are being very lengthy. Can you give your reply in writing? Your response is too long. You have to write to us. Next member, Dr. Leung Ka Lau. Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 children. One 1-year-old, one 3 months old. The administration said that there was a serious shortage. I could not feel it. I had no problem with the purchase of powdered formula. Never have I had a problem. So I could see that this is a very localized shortage situation. Maybe many Hong Kong mothers did not get the right information because the consensus of the medical profession is such that no matter what brand you purchase, the composition of the powdered formula is more or less the same, so you do not have to go for a particular brand. My children use powdered formula, the brand of which is all over the place, and also it is very inexpensive to get that brand. Now, if this is only localized, say for example, there are a dozen brands in the market and 1 or 2 brands are in short supply because some people have certain thoughts, so they're in short supply, and yet you go for this oversensitive reaction. So first question. Does the administration agree that actually the brands are more or less the same, and actually it is not necessary for people to go for just 1 or 2 brands? If you do, then why did you not do more public education on television or on radio? Because if parents know that all the brands are more or less the same, then there will not be any scrambling for any particular brand. Secondly, I still have some time. My child is 1 year old, and pediatricians are telling me that powdered formula is no longer a crucial food item because 1-year-olds have to eat solid food and semi-solid food and also fruit. They do not actually have to have milk. So why do you want to put the limit on 36 months? Do you want to restrict the export of powdered formula for infants and young children up to 36 months of age? Why not 12 months? Because you don't even know what the so-called shortage is about. Is it number 1, 2, or 3? You don't even have that information. So why do you want to set the restriction up to 36 months of age? Those 2 questions. Mrs. Lai, Chairman, the DFH and also the Medical Association have issued statements to say that basically all brands of powdered formula are more or less the same, that the composition is more or less the same, and babies can certainly switch among brands. We will certainly spread that message. But we must also accept an objective reality, and that is some parents do insist on using a certain brand. And the brands that are in short supply in the market take up about 60% of the market share. This is quite a high market share. And there are many parents who are involved and who are in this category. So when there is a shortage, parents were extremely anxious, and we cannot just sit with our arms folded. Plus, from 0 to 6 months, powdered formula is the only food item and the only source of nutrition for infants. And if there is no powdered formula, their health would be endangered, and therefore we believe the regulation is a necessity. Now, why up to 36 months? Dr. Leung is very correct. As I was saying, from 0 to 6 months, it is a necessary and only food item. But after that, there can be supplementary food item. But even so, powdered formula will still be a major food item. For 1-year-olds, for example, they may have egg yolk, they may have fruit or semi-solid food, or even they can drink orange juice. However, powdered formula will still be the main source of nutrition. No, I think you are wrong. Powdered formula is not the main source of nutrition. 1-year-olds just do not have to drink milk at all. You have to seek professional advice. As for your first answer, the logic is problematic. Actually, toilet paper is a necessity for Hong Kong people. If tomorrow there is no supply of toilet paper, it will be a big problem. It is a necessity. If one brand of toilet paper is in short supply because people scramble for it, and if some people insist on making use of that brand of toilet paper, then does it mean that you would again restrict the taking away of toilet paper from Hong Kong, that people can only take 2 rolls of toilet paper from Hong Kong? Mr. Chung Kok Pan. Thank you, Chairman. There is a paper on public hearing and public consultation. It says that there were 50 submissions received. And I could see that only 1/3 of those supported the making of the regulation. 2/3 showed reservation, meaning that the product of your consultation effort is such that there were more people not in support than those in support.
Now that takes me back to your reply to Mr. Vincent Fang's questions. You have said that as far as the quantity imported, the increase was 139%, but then the birth rate has been increased by 16%. However, when we look at the figures about the live births, I understand that there were 88,000 in 2010 and then 91,000 in 2012. But among the many live births here, quite a large number are mainland children. In other words, the birth rate of the Hong Kong population isn't really as much as 16%, because some of the babies are babies born to non-local parents. In other words, the actual demand by the local babies would be of a smaller quantity. So do you actually know how many tins of powdered formula are needed by our local babies on a yearly basis? Mrs. Lai, first of all, a question about consultation. Now, during the first consultation period, we have already set out the figures in our paper. We've also noted the response as well in the media. We are confident that this amendment regulation will have the general support of the community. Well, as to the need for powdered formula by local babies, well, we have had a number of meetings with the formula manufacturers, and they decided on the level of production in accordance with the birth rate. The member talked about babies born to non-local parents, and therefore the actual local birth rate will be lower. But then the quantity imported has been on the rise all the time. In other words, part of the demand comes from outside of Hong Kong, and some of the powdered formula having arrived in Hong Kong has been taken out of the Hong Kong market via the abnormal channels. Well, we can see that the amount imported far exceeds that needed by the local babies. So it is a very simple point, and in fact yesterday the suppliers gave us an assurance saying that they could supply as much as we need. In other words, it is like in the case of rice. You have a specific level of stock sufficient for local babies, and then for the rest we don't care where they are channeled to, a country in Southeast Asia or whatnot. Now, the supply far exceeds the demand by 10 times. So I think it's going to be a very simple issue to be handled. Well, this is the view of Mr. Chung. Next, Mr. Tommy Cheung. Are we being cut to 4 minutes only? He's got nothing to follow up. It's just making a statement. I am a bit confused. If he doesn't want to follow this up, I would like to follow that up in addition to my own question. I think this is quite a good idea. It's not that we haven't got it. Now, for the suppliers, if they can tell us that it takes 26 days to arrive by sea, as long as we have got sufficient powdered formula for 26 days needs, then it will be adequate. Once the stock level has been lowered, then we ask for more to be sent over the sea. And in fact, it is not going to weigh a lot, so maybe it will still make sense if we fly them in. So it is simple. You can just offer a simple solution. Why should you send people to jail? Why would you arrest people if someone would like to have an extra tin of powdered formula? Every year around Chinese New Year, it is a bit more difficult to get them. But it doesn't mean that I shouldn't go across the road to a supermarket to pay $3 extra for a tin of powdered formula. Well, should I just stick to the pharmacy or drugstore? Yes, of course, it's cheaper. Things are cheaper there. But the government doesn't have to guarantee that you can always buy your stuff at a nearby place and at a cheap price. Now, drugstores sell powdered formula at a cheaper rate, but the government has no duty to ensure this. The government has the duty to ensure that for babies who need the powdered formula, they should get it. They should be able to get it. Is it so in such a great shortage that we need to make a law to guarantee it? May I refer to paper CB bracket 2785/12-13 (02). Examples have been cited in relation to economies like Bulgaria, Czech Republic, Hungary, Macedonia, Moldova, Poland, and Ukraine, who have implemented measures concerning barley, wheat, corn, oats, wheat, and wheat flour. But then we aren't talking about temporary prohibition, whatnot. Well, it is untrue to say that we haven't got sufficient powdered formula. I've seen photographs showing that there are tins after tins of powdered formula in their storage. We aren't manufacturers, we just import the powdered formula. So you've been talking all the time, you talk about what's meant to a free port, and you talk about import and export control. You need to control the explosive, you need to control the importation of dangerous drugs, heroin, the white powder. But we aren't talking about drugs, we're talking about powdered formula. So I just fail to see your justification. You are not justified at all. Now, if you say that there is a shortage, have you carried out research? Is it confined to a particular district, or did you simply read the headlines in the newspapers? Have you visited the drugstores? Is it true that they didn't have the powdered formula all the time? Or is it, on the contrary, that all of them have powdered formula to offer? This is lie. You don't have much time left. We've always emphasized that it is a failure of the supply chain. As to whether there is a shortage of supply, all the suppliers are saying that they have an adequate supply. But then, in some cases, certain brands have failure in their supply chain, so that at the retail level, citizens find it difficult to buy the powdered formula. And we saw this over that period of time, and we acted like a mystery shopper. We tried to call the hotline to place orders, and we couldn't get through. So there is objective evidence to show that there is a shortage. So the proposed amendment is to address this problem. Well, I was asking this question. Did you go around to the drugstores to see whether there is a shortage of powdered formula? I'm not asking you to call the hotline. Anybody can try to call the hotline. The PS understands your question. Does she want to answer my question, or is she trying to beat? She's going round and round. Not about calling the hotline. Did you visit the drugstores? Calling the hotline number was part of our job. We also went to the drugstores. Well, I have a simple follow-up. Allow me to answer this question. Please give us the figures. How many of your colleagues went to how many drugstores, looked for how many brands, and you were told that there was a shortage? You introduced this amendment regulation because of shortage. You're saying they're so serious, like there is a shortage of wheat or corn in some other countries. Poor Chair. Well, I also intended to refer to the paragraph cited by Tommy Cheung. What about those countries? They were former Eastern European countries. Does any of them practice free trade? Other than feed corn, I think we're talking about the cereals like barley, oats, wheat, the same like rice in Hong Kong. So try to get it right. Does any of those countries introduce a control on powdered formula? No. Mr. Chairman, I want to ask this question. Now, we have been told that the only purpose is to secure a supply of powdered formula for the babies. Mr. Chung Kwok-pen asked a very valid question. He wanted to make sure that babies under the age of 36 months with an adequate supply of formula. I want to know how much money will be involved. So I want to get the dollar sign. I asked this question because if that's the only purpose, since we've got so much fiscal surplus, I think the government can very well supply free of charge powdered formula to babies under the age of 36 months. That's so much better than injecting money into this fund and that fund and then spending $480 million to train teachers. Allow me to talk about the financial implications. 200 people to man the inspection booths of the CNE, 70 people to carry an investigation, cost time, and then 1,200, the hotline 1823 under the efficiency unit. You need people to answer the calls. You say that you don't need to provide extra resources, but then there is this opportunity cost. So all of them would have financial implications. You are doing so much, and what for? Just to make sure that there is an adequate supply. Won't you agree with me that there is a more clever way to resolve the problem? And then the DFJ's report for the so-called legal opinion in writing, DFJ. You talked about Part 2 of the Basic Law. Now, you said that for Part 2 of the Basic Law, let me get it right. For Part 3, Chapter 3, you say that's very important. It's about the rights of individuals. But then for Chapter 5, you say that rather they are about the principles, and therefore we shouldn't be that strict, and they can be sort of dealt with in a looser manner. But Chapter 5 is also about monetary affairs, living without our means, etc. Are you saying that we can be sloppy as long as we meet the broad principles? We don't have to be too strict, and then it shouldn't be given the same treatment as Chapter 3. Please tell us on what basis can you make such a comment. Mr. Sly. Mr. Chairman, improving the supply chain, I think that's the focus of this issue. This is because we want the supply can reach the consumers. Therefore, if there's no problem with supply, then it means that the evidence lies with the clients, the customers can buy the powdered formula. Well, when you talk about supply chain, does it mean that you will be controlling the export of tissue paper like what Dr. Liang Galao has talked about? Well, it is said that babies over 36 months need not consume that much powdered formula. This is the advice of the doctors. But in fact, there are still a lot of babies between the age of 6 months and 36 months still rely on milk or powdered formula as the main source of nutrition. Perhaps more public education will be needed. Dr. Liang Galao referred to an example of toilet tissue paper. I think for us here, the subject matter is powdered formula. It is a very essential commodity. Well, you have already asked your questions, and you have taken up 3 to 4 minutes. How can I manage the time? Don't get agitated. I think it's best if we just approve it, and there won't be any trouble.
Chairman, yesterday we had a public hearing. Pharmacies, trade associations, and powdered formula suppliers came. The impression they gave me was that there was no problem with supply, that they were very willing to discuss with the administration how we could ensure continuous supply of powdered formula, and also to build up a responsible system so Hong Kong parents can buy powdered formula for infants and young children in Hong Kong. My question is, we are making use of borrowed time. It's just like borrowing money. You have to pay a price for borrowing time. The image of Hong Kong as a free port, you say this is an extraordinary measure to tackle an extraordinary situation. Still, you are having an impact on Hong Kong's image as a free port. It's just like paying interest when you take out a loan. Yes, you want to borrow time or borrow money for a purpose. Last time I asked the Bureau Secretary, what do you want to do in this borrowed time? Plus, yesterday, 2 groups of deputations came. They said with strong emotions that actually before you wrote out the policy, you did not seek a clear understanding of the situation. Before the Lunar New Year, if it was just a temporary breakdown of the system, and in fact there was no shortage of supply and the retail network was willing to cooperate with you, then what do you want to do in this borrowed time? Can I please know for sure what you'd like to do? P.S. Mrs. Lai. Thank you, Chairman. Actually, after the regulation came into effect, we started meeting suppliers. We would like them to do a few things. Number 1, if it is expected that there is a shortage, then they should compress the time for providing supplies to Hong Kong. And also, the distribution of supply within Hong Kong should also be done more efficiently. Because from what we know, every week they only take supplies to the retailers once or twice a week. And if the supply is depleted, they may have to wait for almost a week. And also, there should be better hotline and purchase order placing services. And number 4, they should be more diligent in regulating the sale at retail points. If the practices at retailers are not desirable, they should mete out penalties. They might be doing it, but they should be stricter. And also, in principle, the suppliers may say in principle the supply is good enough and the retailers would cooperate with them. But is this actually done? This is the biggest test. We have to use of this time now to ensure that they are saying is indeed what they can deliver. Well, if that's the case, then this is going to be here forever. Do you have to wait till Lunar New Year next year, so you have another observation of the peak period before you consider revoking the regulation? What are you waiting to see and observe? Can you tell the Bills Committee in more clear terms? Are you going to wait for the Lunar New Year next year? Of course, if 1.4 billion people come to scramble for powdered formula, that would be a problem. Did you watch television yesterday? In the Netherlands, people are saying there should be the limit of just 1 can in every purchase because people are also scrambling for powdered formula in the Netherlands. So when do you expect you can revoke the regulation? Mrs. Lai. Well, actually, I said already in this meeting that we have to be responsible in making such a decision, and also we would have to act in a responsible manner in the future if we were to revoke the regulation. We cannot be making a light decision as to when it should be revoked before we are satisfied the situation is okay. And I was saying that the peak periods would be the Golden Week and also before the Lunar New Year. If we are confident that the new system is feasible and up and running, I believe we need to have it tested in these 2 peak periods, so it may be a year. Thank you. That's it for the first round. We'll now go into the second round. I will strictly limit the time to 3 minutes. 8 members intend to speak in the second round. 8 members. I have heard that members are repeating your questions in all these 3 meetings. Sorry, the speaker is not coming through. You should not limit our time. I have been sitting through this meeting. We are not getting answers. We are not filibustering. Do you want us to filibuster? We are not filibustering. I'm not saying you are filibustering. I think you hate us for dragging the meeting, but I don't feel comfortable with your remark. Well, you are not comfortable. I'm not comfortable either. If you spend 4.5 minutes on your question, then you can't complete it within 5 minutes. I have already said that people who ask questions should be concise and precise. The same for those answering questions. Mr. Chairman, is any part of our questions not appropriate? This is a Bills Committee, Chairman. If you are not patient, don't be the Chairman. I'm very patient. Please show it. Don't just say it. Next round. We still have Mr. Gary Fan in the first round. Chairman, I have a lot of views to say about your 3-minute limit for the second round. Sorry, Mr. Tommy Cheung's mic is not on. That is why I have asked the officials to give you clear answers. Why don't we just go for a vote? Why don't we just say yes or no without scrutinizing the details? Are you saying that? No, I haven't said that. Well, I can still give you 5 minutes. I can give you unlimited time, all right? Next one. First round, Mr. Gary Fan. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I was at the complaints division to hear a case and I have just come back. Yesterday, I understand there was a public hearing, but some of the questions asked today, of course, are repeating what we said yesterday. Some members did not admit it, but anyway, I have heard members asking the administration to explain the basic law and also to ask for written replies, and also the Liberal Party asked 10 questions. They were answered in written form, and now what we are dwelling on is on the details in the answers given by the administration. We'd like to drill deeper into those. I think this is a responsible way of scrutinizing legislation, but if we are to delay the regulation which is regarded to be fair and legitimate and lawful in our eyes, I think that is not good. I think we have all the papers here, and I have heard very carefully what was said yesterday at the public hearing. Some of them did not identify with the regulation, but some of them actually supported it. The Consumer Council wrote in, and some civic organizations also wrote in to support the regulation. It was just that in the end, the focus was on whether we should have the sunset clause. And the administration also answered it, and yesterday I also said we should look at precedent cases, and also when the last amendment was made to the IEO, and whether there was a precedent to include a sunset clause, so that we might limit the flexibility and applicability of the regulation. Mr. Tommy Zhang, you were not there. You asked the question, but you left. The administration said that last time in October 2003, at that time, it was about cassette radios, air conditioners, and television sets that people were using large speedboats to smuggle such items. And in fact, I believe you took part in the cancellation of that order, and you understand that at that time there was no sunset clause. So there was some room for maneuver by the administration so that it could observe the situation to see whether it was under control before amending it. When I got that answer, I felt that with regard to daily electronic products and electrical appliances, if we could deal with them like that, I could not see why we should do otherwise for powdered formula for infant and young children. Because if we do it, we may be overdoing it. Yesterday, I also asked about the period before the Lunar New Year. And as you know, after 2008, we had the issue of contaminated milk powder in China or on the mainland, and there was these periods of short supply. And of course, some retailers were hoarding goods without selling them. Some suppliers did not exactly reveal their sales volume every month, so we could not get hold of the specific situation. Yes, all that was true. And yesterday, the deputations could not answer all these points yesterday. So I would agree that we should take an extraordinary measure when there is nothing else to be done. And whether this should be here permanently, I don't think so. The IVS, Individual Visit Scheme, should actually be the trend for developing tourism in Hong Kong, but it has given rise to such big problems. There are mainland couples or parents coming to give birth, and then there are smugglers. Now, in the end, the administration has mentioned twice that smuggling and parallel trading would be taken together. The administration did not want to do it, but then this is a fact, and the administration has no choice but to face up to it. You cannot just talk about developing tourism or protecting the sale of powdered milk by suppliers and retailers. If we do not criticize them, then you are neglecting the rights of Hong Kong parents to buy powdered formula, because if you lose sight of that, you are not focusing on the issue. The administration is also doing an assessment on the capacity of Hong Kong to receive tourists. If there is an objective assessment done, if we have the figures, then we would know in future how we should develop tourism in a more balanced manner so as to reduce the smuggling problem, because this is already affecting the supply of daily necessities, and I believe future regulations would be proposed. If we want to protect Hong Kong people's rights and interests better, why don't we support the regulation? And why don't we support the relevant policies which can better protect the basic rights of Hong Kong people? I think this is the stance we should take. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fan. Mr. Paul Chair and Mr. Tommy Zhang said that they were not comfortable with the time limit. I'd like to ask members, what about the time limit for the second round? What would you find to be the reasonable time limit? Mr. Chairman, you should also feel comfortable about the time limit. Everybody should feel comfortable. Then I'd like to hear from them, the two of them. Chairman, are you asking me? My understanding is, of course, I'm not as experienced as you are, but when it comes to bills committees, usually we are relaxed with the time limit, and we should be more flexible. Instead of at panel meetings that we have to be very strict with the time limits. What do you mean by flexibility? Why don't we go for 5 minutes? Okay, 5 minutes. It will be very strictly implemented. Dr. Vincent FANG.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just now, members talked about our economy, but I think they weren't really well versed in such matters, but I won't comment on that. I think the government are merely talking about adjectives, using adjectives and qualifiers. Now, members here have been saying that we want to make sure that there won't be any interruption to the supply of powdered formula to our local babies. I think this is beyond doubt. We have consensus here. Now, if that is to be adopted as the objective, I just find it strange that time and again I haven't heard any research data or statistics from the government. Now, it is said that every year we have got 100,000 births per year in Hong Kong, including babies born to non-local parents. So what is the number of cans of powdered formula to be consumed per month by each baby? Now, with doctors here, assuming that they have to consume 5 tins of powdered formula, would it be adequate? 100,000 babies. So simple arithmetic, Mr. Chairman, 100,000 babies on a monthly basis, each will consume 5 tins, so 500,000 tins. As long as I've got a guarantee of 500,000 tins for Hong Kong, then it means that we can truly protect the needs of the babies and they won't have a shortage. Now, the government has been saying that it spread from Shanghai to Mong Kok, Tsim Sha Tsui. Now, local mothers couldn't buy the formula and they couldn't get through the hotline. Is it a strange thing that you can't get through a hotline? Can you always reach the hotline number of a public organization? For the immigration department, did you have the experience that you never get through to the hotline? So don't tell me that you can't get through the hotline if you talk about commercial entities. If you have any experience of manning hotlines, I think we are just putting up a show. Now, you did it for 28 days, 6,100 plus calls. Among them, 3,000 said that they couldn't get sufficient supplies. So what have you done? On average, 87 cases. Is it a lot? 87 cases a day. Is it a lot? But then the administration has to be clear about the figures. Now, we want to protect the 100,000 babies. So, on a daily basis, how many tins of powdered formula do we need to safeguard the interests of the local babies? Please give us a specific answer. Mr. Chairman, we've done a lot because we want to make sure that the Hong Kong babies have an adequate and stable supply. Some members have said that we are buying time so that we can rectify the supply chain failure. This is exactly what we are doing. Yes, you want to improve it. On what basis? Please don't just talk about the Please don't just talk in general terms. You need to do some calculation. Now, if we need 500,000 tins at any time in Hong Kong, then that can be a threshold. You don't have the figures. You just dodge the issue. You just use different terms and adjectives to describe the situation. How are you going to improve it? P.S. Even if there is a supply in Hong Kong, it doesn't mean that the supply can reach the consumers. I think that's what we have to deal with today. But what you are doing now is not going to improve the situation. It's just empty talk. In Macau, I think they are very clear about the level of supplies needed. I think Hong Kong, you just register the babies. Make sure that each baby can have 5 tins of powdered formula. Then it is indeed an improvement and you are really working. Otherwise, it's only empty talk. It's something very vague. When can we see an end to this amendment regulation? You say that we have to wait for improvement. When would it be? You said that there would be a problem in the run-up to Chinese New Year, in the run-up to the Golden Week. Do you know how many tins of powdered formula you need in the Golden Week before you can satisfy the demand? And how many for Chinese New Year? Do you not know that we always have it in the run-up to Chinese New Year? Sin Chung Kai. I think that ultimately the amendment will be approved. Now, probably we are more interested in having a sunset clause. Now, government wants to have flexibility. So as yet, the government would not prefer to have a sunset clause. Maybe we'll have it for a year, year and a half, or 2 years. In the future, on what basis would you decide on calling in the sunset? On what basis would you be confident enough to scrap it? Otherwise, 10 years, 20 years down the road, we'll still be having this export control. That is, you can carry no more than 2 tins of powdered formula when you leave Hong Kong. Now, if we approve the regulation, what sort of statistics would you collect? What measures would you introduce so as to convince yourselves and convince the legislature, convince the community that having put in place all such initiatives, you'll then be able to scrap the regulation? Simple question, lasting no more than a minute, so please give me an answer. P.S. In the course of discussion with the suppliers, all such areas have been referred to. I have talked about improvements in a number of areas, and that would also be the indicators to measure the success or otherwise. Say, for example, in the market, ease or difficulty on the part of parents to buy powdered formula, whether we have a purchase ordering system. That is, at a particular retail outlet, if the consumer would like to get 2 or 3 tins in a few days' time, if the powdered formula can be delivered on time and in the right quantity, then it shows that the supply chain is working and the powdered formula can reach the hands of the consumers. And then the stock levels on the part of the suppliers, the stock levels of the retailers are all matters of interest. So we need to talk to the stakeholders and we must have an overall plan. Do you think that you need to start the collection of data? I did ask this question, but it seems that the majority of members who sat here agreed with me. So would you start collecting the data? If you ask them to produce it, or provide it to you, they won't do it. Are you going to do it on your own? If the administration hasn't got the power to demand the data, I think you can amend the law and say that whoever is handling powdered formula, they have to declare the information. If you don't start collecting the data, how can you answer our questions? Maybe we would like to ask the question, that is there an adequate supply for a particular brand? I think if you want to propose amendments to the declaration, then it is not related to this piece of legislation. It is merely an opinion. I asked a relevant question. How are they going to collect the information? P.S. How are you going to collect the figures? So it's not about the amendment to the declaration. We have started to ask the information from the suppliers. However, the power given to us by the law is limited. So we're still liaising with the suppliers concerning the figures. But then we will certainly work on it further. As to the declaration, to the CNE, we have to check the limit of our powers. Any other follow-up question? Mr. Sin? No? Mr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My follow-up questions related to the picture of exportation. On the 1st of March, the amendment regulation came into effect, and since then, for the exporters and importers, I think they have already applied to you for export licenses. On average, how much time was needed? What was the longest time taken, shortest time taken, and how many of them were successful in getting an export license? Yes, I know that you are already enforcing the amendment regulation. On the face of it, parallel trading activities have subsided substantially. But what about normal trading? Has it been affected? So I want to get the relevant information. Thank you. Mr. Low, DG, Deputy DG. Thank you, Mr. Low, for his question. Between 1st and 12th of March, we received 380 applications for export licenses. 146 licenses have been issued, and the quantity of powdered formula involved was 290,000 kg. We have promised that within 2 clear working days we'll be able to issue an export license. So far, we're able to meet the performance pledge. Mr. Low, when compared with the past, that is before the March 1st amendment regulation came into effect, is there any difference? Mr. Chairman, before the amendment regulation came into effect, you didn't need an export license for powdered formula. But then, when compared with other commodities, the time needed is more or less the same. There is 2 clear working days. Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid this is still within my time slot. If I may ask a further question. For such exports, do you know whether it is going to impact upon the local supply, or are you sure that it won't affect the local supply? Mr. Low, well, for the export licenses issued, they have no impact on the local supply. As we have said, we issue the export license to registered food exporters who have been registered under CAP 612, and at the time of application for an export license, they have to show us documents to show that they have imported the goods from overseas instead of collecting them or sourcing them from the domestic market. So it won't have an impact on the local supply. If I may ask a further question. In relation to the need to take out an export license, have the traders voiced their dissatisfaction, or are they lodging any complaints? And then, for the past 2 weeks, can you confirm that we're able to deal with the problem as outlined by Mrs. Regina Yip, that is small quantities being moved by a large number of traders and normal trade not being affected? Well, for the normal traders, like those importing first and then re-exporting the goods again, I don't think they have been affected. We try to facilitate the applicants as much as possible. So in the course of application, we have tried our best to resolve the problems. As to whether we have received any verbal inquiries, written inquiries, or even complaints, in the past 2 weeks, since it is a new regulation, so on a daily basis, we did receive inquiries both verbally and in writing. So far, we've received 400 verbal inquiries covering a range of topics, like how to get an export license and which powdered formula would require an export license. And in fact, our frontline officers have been most patient in answering the questions from the callers.
Next, Mr. James Toh. Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up on the question asked in the first round.
角度使到佢係能夠合法咁推行啊，會唔會咧好容易？
Are you sure that it is legally sound so that it won't be challenged? I'm really worried. This is because I really want this temporary measure to stay to withstand the pressure. I may very well want to have a sunset clause. Just now, the Deputy DG, TI, gave a reply, and I became worried. Now, we imported 44 million kg. Only 2 million kg has been exported again. In other words, if I remember it correctly, local babies only need a few million kg. In other words, if you take away the local consumption, take away the re-export, you still have a surplus if you take them away from the imported quantity.
Your conclusion is that a lot of the imported powdered formula has been moved outside Hong Kong. Now, where is the problem? You have said that you import 44 million kg. Supposing there is an X number of importers importing them into Hong Kong, and you say that only these importers who import the 44 million kg can export the 44 million kg or part of it. And some of it, of course, may be sold by retail. And so you only allow the export licenses to be issued to these people, and I think that can be a problem. Because if you are subject to the reasonableness test, if you think that there is a wide demand in Hong Kong and the re-export is Z, then you subtract Y and Z from X, then you will see that there would be a quantity for the consumption of Hong Kong babies. This is what you want to ensure. However, those who are making the exports should not necessarily be the importers of the 44 million kg. The final figure, say for example, if it is 30 million kg, and you divide it by 12 months or by 4 quarters, then you can look at the figures applied for instead of looking at the importers, so that only those importers can apply for an export license. Because if you do that, it is going to be faulty. I want you to think that through. Subject to your documentation later and also the analysis by our LA, you are talking about giving approval. And by giving approval, you are legitimizing your very unreasonable policy whereby only the importers of the 44 million kg can export the powdered formula. I think you will be subject to attack. Mr. Mui is from the DOJ. I think it is not too late for you to work on this. When you draft the regulation, you really have to think about how you can further consolidate your so-called export system. Or is it that non-importers, in other words, people who have not imported the 44 million kg can also export the powdered formula? But then, there is another question. If indeed people come forward to apply for an export license, what kind of criteria would you use in order to give approval or not? As I said, you should do an estimate as to how many kg you would approve to be exported from Hong Kong so that you can ensure that there is supply of powdered formula for babies in Hong Kong. This is my legal point. I don't know whether the government or our LA would like to answer. Administration. Chairman, can I please respond? Mr. Chen, let me share with you the thinking process when we drafted the regulation. Hong Kong does not produce any powdered formula. All powdered formula in Hong Kong has to be imported. In our regulation, as Mr. Low was saying, and he was so correct, that apart from limiting it to 2 cans, we also want to protect lawful trade. By that, we mean you have to have import before you can re-export. Well, just one line. Simply if somebody buys from the importer in Hong Kong and he has a BR, so he can apply for re-export. Why do you not approve such applications? What do you mean by the legitimacy? Sorry, time is up. I am very strict now. Mr. Leung Ka Lau. First thing, I like the PS to go back and get the professional advice so you can provide it to the BC, and that is infants over 1 year old. Is powdered formula a necessity? I like to have some objective professional judgment on this. Number 2, the PS just said that the reality is, even if it is not a necessity, the PS said that between 6 and 36 months, many of them still rely on powdered formula as the main food supply. On this point, can you give me some data? How do you know that infants over 1 year old will still heavily rely on powdered formula? In the paper, page 5, there is a table. The 3,323 calls making purchase orders. Were they for number 1 or 2 or 3 powdered formula? Can you substantiate the calls with such information to ensure that infants over 1 year old would rely on powdered formula as their main food supply? Can I ask those 2 questions? PS. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Leung. I will go back and try to get the data required by Dr. Leung. So you don't have it now. You have no basis or justification to say that infants between 6 to 36 months rely on powdered formula as their main supply. Right at the moment, you do not have any basis for saying that, right? PS. I do not have this at the moment. Maybe I have it at my office. Well, even from 0 to 6 months, they may not necessarily have to rely on powdered formula. Yes, they can be breastfed. Sorry, Chairman, can I please say what I want to say? The professional advice is that for infants over 1 year old, they just do not need powdered formula. It is not a necessity. Now you are limiting the export of something which is not a necessity, so it is unreasonable. I still have some time. When you enforce the regulation, how do you distinguish between powdered formula for infant and young children under 36 months of age? Do you rely on the claim of the manufacturers? There may be a 2-year-old who consumes powdered formula which does not state for what age bracket it is manufactured for. So how can you enforce the regulation and then ensure that you are really enforcing it against baby formula for people under 36 months of age? PS. I can be supplemented by the law enforcers in a moment. When we considered the regulation, we did look into that point. The regulation says that the powdered formula itself must be or appears to be. In other words, that it should appear to people that it is to be used by infant and young children under 36 months. And very often, the label of the powdered formula would state what their target group is. Maybe the C&E department can supplement the commissioner. What the PS said is correct. Powdered formula available on the market will also always have this user explanation, and they will tell you what age bracket should use that powdered formula. Now, if the supplier, manufacturer, or the retailer does not state that the powdered formula is for children under 36 months, then it would not be subject to your control. Is that right? PS. Chairman, this is about interpretation of laws. The regulation says that that kind of powder is for or appears to be for. So you rely on the label of the supplier and you rely on their claim. Is that right? Simply put, if there is not such a claim, even if it can be consumed by children under 36 months, it is very good for them. But as long as there is not such a claim, then the parallel traders can still take away these products. Is that right? Well, first of all, it must be for or appears to be for. Even if there is not such a label, but if it really is for children under 36 months, if it is a fact, then it will be under control. Well, you have to get a child of under 36 months before you can allow him or her to drink it, before you can get to the fact. Well, the laboratories can do that kind of test, but I think the phrase appears to be would be problematic. Next member, Mr. Tommy Jiang. Chairman, I'd like to follow up on whether we have figures. Because you are saying that there is a shortage of supply. I'd like to know how many pharmacies, supermarkets you have patrolled and inspected, and what brands have you discovered to be in short supply so that you were led to draft this regulation. Can I please be told such justifications? P.S. Chairman, in the paper we have already clearly stated the nature and the phenomenon of shortage of supply. No, Chairman, my question is very simple. It is all right for you to strictly enforce the regulation, but I asked a very simple question in my first round, and that is, did any department inspect pharmacies and supermarkets? And did you do any survey as to what powdered formula, what brands of powdered formula was in short supply so that you embarked on writing this regulation? If yes, just tell me so. Tell me the results of your survey. P.S. When we assessed the situation, we used a basket of measures. Government officials did go to districts where the impact was particularly serious to see whether there was supply in the market, and we used different channels to gauge the views of the public and also councillors. We also read media reports. Well, she is using up my time. My question was very simple. If she did not understand Cantonese, I could ask that in English. But what I asked her was a very simple question. Did her colleagues go to pharmacies and supermarkets? If yes, for how many times? So that they discovered a shortage of supply of powdered formula. I did not ask her whether she read newspapers or whether she looked at the hotline situation or asked councillors. You will just have to answer my question direct, because you are saying that there is a shortage and you have embarked on the regulation, but first of all you should have done a survey. Did you do the survey? P.S. Chairman, we did send our staff to inspect pharmacies and supermarkets. My question was, Chairman, if you did, then my question is, how many people did you send for how many times to which pharmacies and what supermarkets to see which brands of powdered formula were in short supply? Do you have the figures? Mr. Chang asked the question. Do you have a record? Do you have a specific answer? If not, you can give a written supply. Yes, Chairman, we will give a written supply. Any follow-up? Yes, of course, lots of questions. Well, I will take my time because I have 5 minutes. Chairman, why did I tell you that I would have a focused discussion with you next time? Because this regulation is for negative vetting, and there will be no need for filibustering. Yesterday you had a meeting to have a public hearing, and today you have a meeting. You can have as frequent meeting as you like. Whether we have a long discussion or short discussion, it will have no impact on the coming into effect of the regulation because it is already effective. So let us keep our heads cool. Let us say that legislating is a very solemn piece of work. It is our duty. Please do not lecture me. I'm not lecturing you. I'm having a discussion with you. I am solemnly following up issues. When the administration does not give me replies, when it tells us, when it tells the Hong Kong people that it has to embark on very extraordinary measures, I would have to try to understand where they come from and the justifications. If you do not have a rationale, if you do not have justifications, if you just say, I read newspapers to see that there was a short supply, and I have heard a member saying that his constituents could not buy powdered formula, then we would go for a regulation. That won't do. We really have to go to the root of the issue. if you have to strictly enforce the 5-minute rule, then I would make use of the whole 5 minutes, and then I would have more rounds, because I think the administration is totally unjustified in doing this, that it is not backed by facts, and it is very difficult for me to accept this. Whether you like it or not, whether the administration likes it or not, I like to tell Mr. Gary Fan that I would like very much to supply that Hong Kong babies have a supply of formula milk. Next one, Mr. Paul Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must repeat once again as to why, on the face of it, it is a simple management regulation, and yet time and again we are trying to test the principles behind this move on the part of the administration. Well, too many members and a lot of members are concerned about the protection of human rights when they pertain to individuals. But then when it comes to economic freedom and other things, some members adopt the attitude, as that's shown by the DFJ, that is about principles. We shouldn't be as anxious about such as we are anxious about the protection of human rights in Chapter 3. Can somebody tell me categorically that for economic freedom we should regard it as policies, but for human rights we have to be very, very careful? DFJ, for the question asked by Mr. Paul Chair, well, our paper gives a very clear explanation. For BL 115, we regard it as a policy provision in general, and we also considered the background of this provision in accordance with the guidelines laid down by the CFA. When it comes to the import and export of goods, both before and after the basic law's implementation, it has been in existence, and therefore we are permitted to have certain restrictions. As I have said, and I've been confirmed on this point. Sorry, Mr. Mui, I have to interrupt you because it is already time to finish the meeting. I exercise my power to extend the meeting time by 15 minutes. Mr. Mui, I heard you before. I understand it. But can you cite any case law so that the principles individual rights in Chapter 3 of Basic Law should be classified in another category different from those economic freedom rights in Chapter 5, so that they are subject to a different set of criteria? Mr. Mui, I want to clarify. I didn't say that all the provisions in Chapter 5 are policy in nature. I was only referring to BL 115. In Chapter 5, there are also other provisions which protect certain rights, like Article 102, which protects property rights. 115 is about the policy of free trade, but in fact it also talks about safeguarding the free movement of goods, intangible assets, and capital. So is it purely about policies, or is it on a par with the protection of other sorts of freedoms, like the freedom of movement? Mr. Mui, freedom of movement of individuals. Sorry for interrupting you. But what about the freedom of movement? Is it a policy or is it an absolute right? Mr. Mui, for Article 115, our understanding is that so far the courts of Hong Kong have not developed a case law as to whether this article is to confer a right on an individual. But then our paper has given an analysis setting out our view. We believe that this is a provision to establish an overall policy, because in this article the word policy has in fact been used. Well, the wording of this article, in the light of the background of this article, we have formed an opinion which has been set out in the paper. Well, in fact, the immigration ordinance was already there before. The import and export ordinance was already there before the implementation of the basic law. Now we're talking about certain goods. We haven't got hard evidence. There's no evidence to say that there is serious shortage, and yet we are doing this. So I just wonder whether we are violating the broad principle of free trade as well as the safeguards promised here. So it isn't a question about whether we have had the import and export ordinance all the time. Next, Mr. Chong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The administration mentioned that they would like to improve the supply chain, but of course the government is not willing to give us a timetable as to when and how the supply chain will be improved. Probably the administration is worried that it can never be able to improve it. Perhaps the suppliers can improve it themselves. As Vincent FANG has said, maybe roughly speaking, we need 500,000 tins a month. If the suppliers can do it themselves, make sure that we have 500,000 tins for a month, and we can deliver the powdered formula in 3 days' time, then does it mean that it's an indicator that we have improved the supply chain? P.S. As to whether the amendment regulation is still needed, we have to look at a basket of factors, one being the degree of ease and reliability of local consumers buying the powdered formula. Can you not give us other indicators as well? What other indicators are to be involved? Mr. Chong, my question was, what other indicators? So, other indicators, what actually do you mean? The administration said that they have to make reference of other indicators. What other indicators then? Mr. Chairman, when I answered the questions from other members, I also referred to such factors like the efficiency and flexibility of restocking by the retailers. And then in the case of suppliers, should there be a shortage in the local market, we want to know that in the case of a low stock level, we want to know how quick they can replenish it. Generally speaking, it takes weeks to replenish the stock, so all such factors will be taken into account. Mr. Chong, Mr. Chairman, perhaps the government shouldn't be talking about examples. We'll just list out all the factors, and this way we can adopt that as the basis to seek a solution. Therefore, perhaps before the law comes into effect, if we can handle all the issues, then we can avoid the legislative work. If the problem can be resolved, does it mean that you can dispense with the need to legislate? Mr. Chairman, for the indicators or the factors, we've already asked the suppliers to start doing it. So we have to assess the degree of compliance, and we need to check whether the undertakings can be honored during the peak periods. Mr. Chong, in the light of the concerns of the administration, we are saying that the business sector can do it on behalf of the administration. So if they have a list of factors, and if they're worried about the 1st of May, 1st of October, Golden Weeks, if the business sector can exercise self-discipline and can resolve all the problems, does it mean that the administration can withdraw the amendment regulation? Mr. Chairman, well, supply of powdered formula has always been a commercial decision. Had there not been the involvement of public interest, the government should not and will not intervene. So in the near future, we want to improve the supply chain, and in fact, to a large extent, we have to count on the business sector to do it. The administration is merely setting out the factors, indicators, and we'll try to see the result. So Mr. Chung is saying that if the business sector can do it themselves, we will be more than happy to see that happen. But we need to give them guidelines, and we have to observe, and we have to assess whether they are meeting the requirements. Well, the business sector is intended to do this because it is a commercial act. If the business sector can do it, we don't want the administration to intervene and try to resort to legal means to deal with it. So I'm asking for an itemized list. Can you not give them a list? Mr. Chairman, as I have said, we have already started to set out the criteria for the reference of the suppliers. I say it is too early to pass a judgment. We are able to stabilize the situation all because of the coming into effect of the amendment regulation. Gary Fang, I have no duty to speak on behalf of the administration. I tried to answer some of the questions. Vincent FANG from the Liberal Party said that 100,000 babies, 500,000 tins of powdered formula would be a reasonable figure. But then it is said that there are 200,000 or even 1 million parallel traders. If they take 5 tins a day, doing it once a day, then we are talking about 13 million tins a month being taken out of Hong Kong. In 2012, we have 40 million travelers, 48 million travelers coming to Hong Kong on individual visit scheme. 10 or 18 million don't stay overnight. And then we have got 95% of those coming to Hong Kong on multi-visit visitors are parallel traders. Then we are talking about 9 million tins a month being involved in parallel trading. Now for smuggling, I think we need the cooperation of the customs of two places. In the past, we've been able to deal with the question of smuggling of electronic goods, etc. We didn't impose a duty. It's a matter of the avoidance of the duty. Well, the money should go to the public coffers, and in fact, the money has gone to the pockets of the smugglers. I don't think it is a purely commercial issue. I think it is a question of the nutritional needs of the babies. It's a matter of confrontation between the mainland and Hong Kong. Now, the smuggling activities have changed in terms of the nature. It is now a matter of large number of parallel traders moving the goods in small quantities. Do we allow our livelihood to be affected by the individual visit scheme? Yes, we can spend a lot of time on how babies under 12 months old are to be fed. And then Mr. Zhang has also asked a lot of questions in great details. They are for the technocrats to answer the details, to give answers to the details. But then for the broad direction, I think it is our duty as lawmakers to check whether we agree with the broad direction and are willing to amend the law. For the Liberal Party lawmakers, now, Mr. Tommy Cheung said that Hong Kong babies should be given assurance in terms of powdered formula. I think the mainland babies should also be given this guarantee. I think during the CPPCC and NPC meetings, you should have told the mainland authorities that they should lower the import duty for powdered formula, and then people don't have to resort to parallel trading. If we have that much faith in free economy, and if you attach that much significance to it, then that should be the direction of our discussion. It's almost time. Now, there is an outstanding issue. We are not able to embark on the cross-by-cross scrutiny, so we need to have one more meeting. Date of the next meeting. The Secretariat has suggested a day, the 19th of March.
10:45 to 12:45 on the Tuesday. Any questions? I just hope that after we have had a thorough discussion of the issues, we can proceed to cross-scrutiny. Vincent FANG, James To, Leung Ka Lau, Paul Chair would like to ask questions for a third time. So when we resume, I hope you will be here on time to ask the questions. Point of order, can they not provide the information to us next time? What information? In a number of areas. First of all, Mr. Sin talked about the import and export data. Mr. Low, did you get the questions? My understanding is that Mr. Sin would like to know about the total quantities of powdered formula on a yearly basis, and he would like to have a breakdown concerning the different brands. He would like to have such a list. Well, give us as much information as possible. Dr. Leung Ka Lau and other members have also talked about the definition of powdered formula. I'm afraid that there may be a loophole.
Because if you change anything, there may be a loophole created. I'd like the administration to think whether there can be further improvements. Mr. Chair, just now you did not summarize what members would require. We did not have to summarize, because if you make a request, they have the responsibility of taking it down. I have no responsibility for summarizing your request. Sorry, Chairman, this is not what I meant. I don't understand why you are that jumpy. I'm not jumpy. I'm very solemn in conducting this meeting. No matter what wording you use, people know why. I hope the administration will supply a few things. Number one, Mr. Tommy Chung asked about the actual inspections you conducted so that you come to this conclusion. You read media reports and also complaints from members. We'd like to have your exact specific survey report. Number two, I think they have written down. P.S. Have you written down all these requests? Thank you. Did you write down what Mr. Dennis Kwok said? Well, time is over. I have to conclude the meeting. I have no power to further extend the meeting. Meeting is adjourned here. Thank you.